We spend a massive amount of our day doing this job that we don't even realize we're doing. It's just this constant, exhausting, completely invisible labor.
Oh, yeah, like a 24/7 gig. I mean, no weekends off, no vacation days, and zero chance of retirement.
Zero. And that job is, well, it's maintaining, defending, and just constantly serving our own egos.
Right.
Think about it. You get a vaguely worded email from a colleague,
Yeah.
and suddenly you are spending an hour agonizing over how to respond so you don't look weak or
Oh,
uninformed.
totally. Or, you buy a certain kind of car or dress a certain way entirely to project this highly curated image of yourself to complete strangers.
Exactly. In our highly individualized world, it feels like we're all just um, full-time PR managers for the brand called me.
Yeah, and we normalize it, right? We treat it as just part of being a functioning adult. But that constant maintenance of the self, it creates a profound amount of underlying tension.
It really does.
The energy required to constantly monitor how the world perceives you is just staggering.
Which is exactly why we are taking a deep dive into a really intriguing piece of source material today. We have a translated excerpt from a March 2013 text by an author named Sufeng.
Right.
And it's titled, very boldly, I might add, "It is ego that blocks our way to heaven."
A subtle title.
Very subtle. And the radical proposition we are exploring today is this: what if the only true shortcut to joy, harmony, and, heaven is the total unconditional dismantlement of that PR manager?
Yeah, the text suggests this PR manager isn't just exhausting, it's actually the mechanical root cause of literally everything wrong with our lives.
Wow.
The author is essentially asking us to look at the very bedrock of what we consider a good life, things like personal ambition and even a happy marriage, and view them as psychological traps.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text starts with a central, absolute premise, right?
Yeah.
That ego is the root of all trouble, pain, and misfortune. And it doesn't just mean your personal headaches. It goes much, much bigger.
Right, the author explicitly claims that harm and pain are exclusively created by people with egos.
Exclusively.
Exclusively. The logic the text lays out is that the ego acts as a barrier to natural harmony. Like, biologically and socially, an ego demands that you prioritize your own survival and comfort over the whole.
Right. Me first.
Exactly. And that inherent selfishness inevitably brings harm to others, to society, and to nature simply because you're hoarding resources. And that could be money, emotional energy, or physical space.
It kind of reminds me of a clogged filter in a fish tank.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Because a filter is supposed to let the water flow and harmonize with the whole system. But when it gets clogged, when it gets an ego, so to speak, it traps everything.
Right.
It hoards all the gunk. And eventually it poisons itself and the entire environment around it because it stops participating in the flow.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. The text argues that this behavior creates a vicious cycle. The harm you project outward by hoarding those resources or defending your little perimeter, it reflects right back onto you.
It poisons your own tank.
Exactly. You become isolated, paranoid, disconnected. The ego inevitably drags a person down into what the author calls a lower space of life, which is just this state of constant friction with reality.
Constant friction. That sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
But the text proposes an alternative, right?
Right.
It relies pretty heavily on this idea of permaculture to explain the solution.
Yes, the permaculture agriculture metaphor.
Right, where instead of forcing crops to grow in isolated rows,
Yeah.
fighting nature with chemical pesticides, you design this self-sustaining ecosystem. The plants naturally support each other's growth.
The waste of one plant becomes the nutrient for another.
Exactly. Everything works together.
Hmm.
And applying that to humanity is the core of the author's solution. If we remove that clogged filter, that ego, we stop fighting the system.
The text claims that if we align with the greatest creator's will, which it basically equates with the law of nature, the wind and the rain arrive on time, everything harmonizes.
You're no longer a separate entity fighting the world for your slice of the pie. You are a seamlessly integrated component of nature.
People just enjoy peace and carefree lives as parts of that natural system.
Now, living like a harmonious permaculture garden sounds idyllic. Really, it does. But it makes me wonder how this aligns with the established spiritual traditions humanity has followed for millennia.
Right, because usually those traditions have very strict, sometimes conflicting rules about how to reach heaven or paradise.
Exactly. But the author actually pulls off this massive, flattening synthesis of world religions.
It's quite a move. The text basically groups the core teachings of major spiritual figures and divine beings into one unified theory of ego death.
One single theory.
Yeah, the claim is that gods, the Buddha, celestial beings, and saints, despite all their apparent historical and theological differences, they all actually share one singular fundamental mechanism for salvation.
And that mechanism is abandoning the self. It's fascinating how the text breaks it down. For the Buddha, the text states that by abandoning the ego, form, and worry, one enters the Elysium world. Then for gods, abandoning the ego is the only way to receive life, spelled with capital L-I-F-E, in the text and peace.
So it maps ego death directly to divine vitality, and then it moves to celestial beings, where the teachings are to, quote, take things as they are, associate with others by following predestined relationships, follow your destiny, and be carefree.
Wow.
It's the ultimate expression of non-resistance. You aren't forcing outcomes, you're effortlessly riding the currents of reality.
Now, I can track with the non-resistance of celestial beings. That makes sense. But then we get to the saints.
Yeah.
The text says the teachings of saints are to lack the hearts of egos, but to take the hearts of the world as their own. Now, I hear the logic, but biologically speaking, empathy causes burnout.
Oh, absolutely.
We see it in nurses and therapists, in anyone on the front lines of human suffering. If you take the hearts of the world as your own, as the text suggests, doesn't that just open you up to feeling everyone's pain? How does that lead to a carefree fairyland?
Right. It sounds like a recipe for a total nervous breakdown. What's fascinating here is how the text actually redefines the mechanics of experiencing that pain. Because when we hear pure land or paradise or fairyland, we typically think of a location, right?
Yeah, like an afterlife destination devoid of suffering.
Exactly. But the author's description suggests paradise is a state of existence achievable right now, entirely dependent on how you process the world's input by shedding the self.
Wait, really? So feeling the world's pain doesn't break you?
Not if the ego is truly gone. See, burnout happens because the ego filters the world's suffering and asks, how does this affect me? How can I fix this to make myself feel better?
Oh, I see. It takes on the pain as a personal burden.
Right. But if you lack an ego heart, there's no person there to be burdened. The barrier between you and the world dissolves. You're aware of the suffering, but the personal anguish associated with it, that narrative of despair vanishes. You simply observe and act without the heavy, exhausting emotional attachment.
Okay, so the filter is completely gone. The water just passes through the tank without getting trapped and poisoning anything. Okay, but synthesizing ancient philosophies and talking about dissolving the self, I mean, it's intellectually interesting, sure, but it remains incredibly abstract. Does the author provide any tangible proof that this actually works for real, modern humans?
Well, the author anticipates that exact skepticism. The text explicitly states, facts speak louder than words. And to provide those facts, it introduces a real-world, modern example, a community called the New Oasis for Life.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text makes a direct, highly provocative comparison between the people living in this new oasis for life and people living in traditional marriages and families.
The assertion is unambiguous. The author states that people living in the new oasis for life, which operates collectively without personal property or exclusive relationships, are far more joyous, free, and happy than those living in traditional family structures.
That is wild. In our modern society, we frame marriage and raising a family as the ultimate acts of selflessness, right? You compromise with your spouse, you sacrifice your sleep, your money, your personal time for your kids. We view that as putting others before yourself. But this text argues the exact opposite. It views traditional family as an expanded ego.
Yeah, the psychology behind that is compelling, honestly. Biologically and socially, we form family units to protect our genetic lines and pool resources. We buy a house in a good school district. We build a fence. We build a savings account.
Right.
It's no longer just me, but it is absolutely still my spouse, my children, my house, my legacy.
Wow, yeah.
You've just drawn a slightly larger circle around what you consider yours, and you're spending massive amounts of energy defending that circle against the rest of the world.
It inherently creates an us versus them dynamic. If there is a limited amount of resources, my ego dictates that my kids get them, not yours. It is still exclusive.
Exactly. So the text lays out this inverse formula based on the new Oasis community. The freer you are from ego, meaning the more you abandon exclusive structures like marriage and private property for this collective, the more happiness, freedom, and joy you experience.
And conversely, serving the ego guarantees less freedom.
Right. The more you serve your ego by clinging to those traditional structures, the less happy you will be. And just to remind the listener, we are neutrally recording the text's specific worldview here, but it really highlights how deeply this challenges conventional social norms.
It asks us to look at the very things we consider the markers of a successful adulthood and view them as the exact mechanisms keeping us out of paradise.
It demands a complete unwiring of our biological imperatives.
Okay, but abandoning traditional family structures for collective is a massive leap. Let's say a listener is actually willing to entertain this. If someone were actually going to attempt this text's version of a brilliant life, what are the actual step-by-step instructions?
Well, the author provides an explicit 8-step blueprint to achieve ultimate freedom. And as you might expect, it starts with foundational alignment and escalates into severe psychological dismantling.
Let's hear it.
Step 1 is to align with the law of nature, the will of the greatest creator. Step 2 is to follow the combined teachings of Jesus Christ, Buddha Sakyamuni, and Lao Tzu.
Okay, so that sets the baseline. You align yourself with the universal flow and those great teachers. Then we move into the practical application with steps 3 and 4, which are all about extreme integration.
Right. Step 3 is to abandon your ego and integrate into the collective and nature. Step 4 takes it further, desire nothing, but take things as they are. The text literally advises to drink as you thirst, eat as you hunger, and sleep as you tire.
Drink as you thirst, eat as you hunger. It sounds simple, but think about the friction that causes in modern life.
Oh, massive friction.
You don't eat because you have a noon lunch meeting scheduled. You eat because your biological system requires fuel. You completely abandon the social clock in favor of the natural clock.
Exactly. You don't force networking connections to advance your career. You just allow relationships to occur effortlessly.
And if abandoning your schedule is tough, step 5 is where it gets incredibly demanding. Own nothing and no one.
This directly unwires that expanded ego we discussed earlier. No property, no exclusive relationships, no hoarding of resources for your inner circle. Total relinquishment.
Wow. Then steps 6 and 7 move from the physical to the psychological. Step 6, neither interfere with others, nor try to control or change them. Just be yourself with your original nature.
That's tough.
And step 7, neither analyze and judge right from wrong, nor judge others' advantages, disadvantages, and qualities. Extreme non-interference.
This is perhaps the hardest directive for the modern mind to accept. We are socially conditioned and often economically rewarded for analyzing situations and categorizing them.
Oh, completely. Giving the right to determine what is right and wrong is a profound surrender of the ego's authority. Our entire digital infrastructure, social media, news cycles, online discourse, it's entirely built on judging right versus wrong. It's how we signal our virtue to our tribe.
Yeah, judging someone else is a core ego-protecting mechanism. When you declare someone else's actions as wrong, you are inherently elevating your own status as right. You're reinforcing your identity.
Right, my team is better than your team.
Exactly. To give up that judgment means floating in moral ambiguity. It means accepting that you do not have the authority to dictate the moral fabric of the universe. You simply observe.
Which leads right into the final step, step 8. Seek out and listen to selfless, humble people who own nothing and look like saints and servants. The text says it is correct to listen to them.
Your only guides should be those who have already successfully dismantled their own firewalls and live in that state of non-judgment.
Looking at these 8 steps together, the analogy that jumps to mind is like extreme spiritual minimalism.
Oh, definitely.
We've all heard of Marie Kondoing your closet, right? Holding up a sweater and asking if it sparks joy, and if not, throwing it out. But this text is suggesting you Marie Kondo your entire consciousness.
Yes.
You're throwing out your desires, your exclusive relationships, your moral judgments of right and wrong. If it reinforces the PR manager, toss it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this rigorous blueprint leads to a profound paradox at the very end of the text. The author concludes with these statements: only selflessness helps one realize their self, and only freedom from ego helps one achieve their self. Notice that the final word, self, is capitalized.
Wait, really? It's a brilliant contradiction. The text spends the entire time telling you to destroy, abandon, and completely obliterate your ego. To own nothing, judge nothing, be nothing, and the ultimate reward for completely destroying your ego is that you actually find your truest self.
Right. The text suggests that what we call the ego, that exhausted PR manager, is actually an imposter. It's a false temporary construct built by society and biology that obscures who we really are. By tearing down the facade of the ego, the true capitalized self, which is already harmoniously connected to nature, is finally revealed. You don't build the self, you uncover it by removing the debris.
It's like wiping a thick layer of mud off a mirror. The mirror was always there, but it couldn't reflect any light until you scrubbed away the dirt.
And that shift in perspective entirely changes how we view our daily struggles. The problem isn't the chaotic world around us, the problem is the heavy, muddy lens through which we demand the world interact with us.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, whether you're prepping for a stressful meeting or just feeling overwhelmed by the demands of modern life, the text offers a radical alternative. What if the stress isn't coming from the world, but from the exhausting maintenance of your own ego? We started this deep dive exploring the text's uncompromising view of the ego as a destructive force that blocks natural harmony.
We navigated the author's grand synthesis of global spiritual teachings, mapping out how diverse traditions all point toward the same mechanism of ego death.
We then examined the text's provocative challenge to conventional society, analyzing why traditional marriage and family act as an expanded ego and how the collective model of the new oasis for life attempts to unwire that biological imperative.
And finally, we walk through the extreme 8-step blueprint of spiritual minimalism, ending on the paradox that achieving true selfhood requires total, unconditional selflessness.
So what does this all mean?
Well, exploring these concepts leaves us with a massive, somewhat unsettling implication. The text paints a beautiful picture of a carefree, permaculture existence achieved through total non-attachment and non-judgment. But consider this, we spend our entire lives developing our critical thinking, trying to be on the right side of history. What if the ultimate form of peace actually requires giving up the need to be right altogether?
That's a huge question.
It is. Is it possible to navigate the modern world without an ego? Or is this beautiful permaculture ideal only possible if you completely step outside of society?
That is a staggering thought to end on, and figuring out where you stand on that spectrum is the real work. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to take these ideas, turn them over in your mind, and bravely practice your own exploration of what we discussed today.